Yeah. All right. Why are we meeting today?
So I want to talk to you about the main metrics, the main 6 to 9 metrics that physical therapy owner needs to be tracking and visualizing by department. So to
Okay.
me, the departments, I don't know what departments you have, but my departments are going to be finance, billing, operations, admin, and marketing.
So divisions or
So,
departments? I don't want Kevin to get
but
mad at me. So
I guess there would be divisions,
I think that's how
right?
I in my organization I label them. The big ones are divisions, and they're I don't even really call them departments underneath it, but it's like things that are under their departments. Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
But divisions, like every organization has three divisions, whether they want them or not. That's marketing, it's operations, it's finance. And you can
Yep.
kind of split them out from there. So whatever, it doesn't matter how you
Yeah.
label them, just the
Yeah, and starting out, those are the big ones. But as you grow and scale a little bit and have multiple clinics, you got to start looking at tracking some other things. So that's. I mean, I have 3 locations. We're thinking about opening number 4 this year, and I really want to dial in and have visualization of my data with the main stats per division, right? So
right.
that way I can look at it. So right now I'm sitting in New York. My clinic is in Memphis, and I want to be able to pull up a dashboard and look and see how my clinic is running without me there. So,
Okay. All right. So I just came off of annual planning, and there's a couple different things that we look at. I think in the end, all of us kind of look at similar numbers, but there's different things. When you start to plan something out, I like to start like way at the top level, and then you kind of build it down. It's kind of similar to an org board, right? So you start at the very top, that's the executive, and then you kind of build your org board down from that. So let me pull up my annual planning meeting. We, over the last couple of years, have done like the major metrics that we're going to track for the year. So in our one of the tabs in our annual planning meeting, which I'll pull up right now, is major metrics. So let me share my screen. Let me spread this out. Okay. And here
so
we
many
go.
note takers.
Yeah, several note takers. So make sure all the notes are taken. Okay. So this is one tab where we looked at this is a very like high level, like pretty much every, well, I shouldn't say that because I have some quirky stats in here, but these are the stats that we looked at last year. So everybody, no matter what you're doing, total visits, total initial evaluations, total revenue, total expenses. We look at graduation rate a lot. Over-the-counter collections and lost visits due to missed authorization. We actually broke this down into lost charges because sometimes only specific charges in a note will get denied. So we're breaking that down a little bit more this year. Revenue per FTE. That's just it can be used as an efficiency metric, so it can tell you like how efficient your staff is being, or how busy or how slow they are, depending on how you look at it. Dropouts is a big one for us. So we look at people that come 5 times or less and do not successfully graduate. Those are particularly important patients we want to reach out to because there was something got lost. Those are kind of rare in our organization. Arrival rate, I think pretty much every practice looks at that. Length of stay, visit frequency, schedule efficiency, space utilization percentage. So this is like if you have a 2,000 square foot clinic, we feel like you should be able
Mhm.
to see 200 visits in there a week. That's a pretty standard number. Um, Lost plans of care. We started looking at this year. So these are initial evaluations that were in our schedule and did not come in for their initial evaluation, either no-showed or canceled. We took a big look at that this year. We had a total of 116 this year. We want to try to cut that down, but that was actually a big improvement from last year. We made the assumption, oh, so they got sick. They're definitely going to reschedule. So no one needs to kind of track that down. Someone owns that metric in our organization right now. And then cost per customer acquisition. That's another pretty common one. You just take all your marketing costs over a period of time, all of your initial evaluations over a period of time. You divide that number in, and it can give a basic idea of how much it costs you to get a new patient in the door. So we track a lot more metrics than that, but those are kind of like the what we talked about earlier. I think what you're looking for, and it's a great example today. Hey, I'm on a desert island, or I'm up in a resort in New York, and my clinic is down in Memphis. I just want to read the newspaper. I want to open up the newspaper. This dates us as well. I want to see the box score. So ton
Right.
of baseball games yesterday. I want to see who got hits, who got home runs, how many strikeouts. Like that's you open up the newspaper and you want to read a dashboard. So that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah, and some of the founders of PTB like track like hundreds of stats, and that's a little bit overwhelming when you're starting out, and or you're just like I can't really think wrap my head around 100 different stats. So I just shared a document with you to your uh, Robbins PT West
Okay.
email um, that I'm using to break down. So I have a few of the stats in there, or a lot of the stats in there that you just talked about, but also there might be named a little bit differently. So did you get that document?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me pull that up. Mm, Inbox. Here we go. All right. We'll take a second and share my screen. Mm,
And this is a very very simple document right now. But what I want to do overall, I'm going to give this to our visualization, our data visualization lady to make her to help her to see what I want. But these are going to be stats that are going to be tracked by the individual divisions and different individuals within that division that are going to talk to each other. Um, I'm also going to break this down by why this is important and how to actually track it. So there's no confusion on it. So yeah, so this is kind of what I wanted to brainstorm with you a little bit. Some of those things in there, like marketing. The one thing that you said in marketing is cost per new patient acquisition. That's the
mhm.
perfect. That's I want to definitely add that one to it. But the way I look at marketing, marketing is supposed to drive leads, right? They're not supposed to get new patients. They're supposed to drive leads. Our front desk is our ultimate. Um, they're our sales force. So I want to make sure that that we're having enough leads and then we're converting those. So a couple of things. So total leads, and then she actually does track the lead conversion rate, which is a percentage of those new patients that come in that actually are converted to new patients. So um, I think you had an initial evaluation arrival rate. You called it something different. Plan of care, lost plan of cares.
Well, no, I mean, we look at initial evaluation arrival rate, so that's a separate one that we look at on our main dashboard. But that changes if we can recapture those. So when we do
Right.
our leadership team meeting, that's a stat that we look at every week. If it goes below 90, we need some kind of explanation for that. Really, that's not even true. If it's not 100, then at the leadership team meeting, you have to present on, yep, that patient rescheduled the next week because they were sick, or that patient's in the hospital. We put them back into a separate tracker to follow up with them in 2 weeks because that's when they said they would get out. So we look at,
Gotcha.
yeah, total rivalry and initial evaluation rivalry.
So yeah, so the total arrival rate. When I was looking at what stats you just had, you had a plan of lost plan of care number,
Mhm.
which I believe would be like the inverse proportion of an initial evaluation arrival rate, right?
Right. So we wanted to get an actual number on it because it's like, oh, 94%. That's pretty good. Well, we had
Right.
116 lost plans of care. You take that and you multiply it by our plan of care value. That's a lot of money.
Right. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. I love that. So, but is that a marketing stat or is that an admin stat?
Ooh, no, that's an admin stat because
Yeah.
once it leaves marketing, now it's admin's responsibility and operations a little bit. Like I'll tell you, the new change in policy we had this year was if an initial evaluation disappears and does not reschedule, it's going to be the clinical director that calls them. So the clinical director, as everybody knows, if you have someone on the clinical side call somebody, it's typically going to be more effective than if someone on the admin side calls somebody. For better or for worse, it's like, hey, I'm your PT. You had an initial evaluation with me on Tuesday at 4 o'clock. I just want to make sure everything's okay and just want to get that rescheduled. So you can call this number and reschedule that. If I don't hear from you in a week, then I'll give you a call back and just see how everything's going. Bye.
So I'm just going to throw it in this document right here. So that's a number we're going to track on a weekly basis. So lost plan of care slash initial evaluation. Those are people that were on the schedule, but either canceled or no showed and did not get rescheduled.
Hmm.
Right? Okay, awesome. So let's just look at the marketing. So is there anything else that you're tracking from a marketing or find um, important from a marketing stat? Again, remember, I'm just trying to go 6 to 9. 9 is the max because I want to be able to visualize it on the dashboard very quickly. So I don't want to have 25 stats. Like once we get that convoluted, it gets a little less important. So the most important ones, and if there's a couple on here that you don't find as important, just put a little asterisk by them, and we can talk about why I think they might be important.
I mean, to me, the buckets are important. So you have some buckets in here. You have MD referrals, but that's the only bucket that you have. So it's either they're an MD referral or they're not. I'm sure you track that somewhere, but if you don't want to track
We
it,
do.
yeah.
We do. But my marketing. So in my organization, my marketing girl, we'll say, her main stat is MD referrals because she's outside marketing. Now, internal marketing becomes more of a clinician thing. So they're asking for those friends and families. They're asking for those Google reviews. So if somebody's coming from a source other than a doctor, I can't really tie it to the efforts of my marketer. Now, because we have a lot of internal automation that's sending out like reactivation campaigns that really aren't her thing. They're just an automated thing that's kind of ongoing. Now, she is responsible for making sure that those things are turned on and off so we can make that argument that total leads can be broken down if we want to put little bullet points under total leads and have MD referrals and just kind of classify those buckets. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want less, then don't do that.
Yeah.
So you can, if you want to take a deeper look into things, you could always kind of keep going down. But if you want a true, like just a dashboard with as few as possible, I would probably not put your buckets in here.
Yeah. So,
Um,
just while we're talking, if we're going to share this video with anyone, what we're looking at with a dashboard, right, is like a way a physician would look at a blood pressure or an EKG, right? So as long as the EKG is perfect, right, and everything's moving along the way it should, because you have the main stats and you have benchmarks for those main stats. As long as everything's ticking along and going the way you want it, then you don't really need to dive super deep. But if there's a blip that shows an irregular heartbeat, then you can dive deeper into the substats of the main stat.
yeah. So social engagement, how are you measuring that?
That's why I kind of left that blank right there because I really don't know. Either, I mean, you could do it via likes or comments or something on your social media post.
Mhm.
The number of
Followers.
clicks, followers, whatever.
Yeah.
So I kind of left that one blank to discuss with you, like how because she is also in charge of our social media
Yeah.
um, and posting 3 times a week on all platforms. So we should be seeing a positive growth in followers if our content is good. If our content is not good, they're not going to grow, and then we need to look at the content that we're producing.
Yeah, so this is a tough one for me because I'm like, okay, if we grow our followers and our reach, like we don't do a good job converting on organic posts. So it's hard to measure the value of that. I think it's super valuable for recruiting, for like PTs, PTAs, admin staff. Like when we get an application in, one of the first things we do is we look at the application, we could look at the cover letter, and sometimes we'll go to their social media and just kind of see what
One
they're,
hundred percent.
yeah, your your people that are checking you out are doing the same thing. The first place,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Pittman PT. What's going on with their website? If their website hasn't been updated in forever, it's like, oh, okay. And if they have social media, oh, they haven't posted on here in 6 months, okay. It's fair or not. That's one way that they're going to look at it. So
Yeah.
I'm just not converting a ton of new patients off of social media. So are you guys
Now,
doing that?
eh, no, we're not. But at the same time, I'm not so sure that that's the purpose. Like we've been running some ads on Facebook and Instagram, and yeah, we're getting leads. They're not converting at a high level, and that's one thing that we looked at in our annual planning meeting was the cost per lead conversion for Facebook ads and direct to evaluation, and it's not high enough to justify the cost, but one thing that you have to think about with social media is branding, right? So it's just getting your brand and making it omnipresent in the community so that people are just subliminally, drawn to you based on content.
Mhm. Yeah, so
So
that for us has always been a tough thing to measure. So for me, I wouldn't measure it, but it would be cool to see, like, if that number goes up and your initial valuations go up, that
right.
can be good. I don't know if you can directly tie it to that, but yeah. So in terms of what you're doing there, we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens. I'll just show you like our OKRs for our marketing division, and that might help us figure out kind of what we're going to do. So obviously, big stats that we're going to look at is total plans of care started in the year. So we want to start 2,000. That's initial evaluations. Um, so for the first quarter, we want 403. And then here are the actions that we have to take. So we're looking at plans of care, so initial evaluations. We're looking at workshops that we're doing. So for our stats, maybe it would be conversions from workshops. So it can be, hey, we plan on doing like somewhere around, well, 20 to like 80 workshops this year. So if we do 80 workshops and we got 80 new plans of care on that, I'm like, oh, well, I don't know if the effort is kind of worth that. We'll have to see at the end of the year. We have a specific key result of 920 plans of care started from past patient, friends, and family buckets. So we feel like that was a underutilized bucket to go after last year based on the numbers that we set. So we feel like if we can reinvest in that with more workshops, community education, and with more campaigns, we feel like we're going to do that. And then this is ironically, we happen to be in the same program where we're going out to employers and trying to get direct to employer for self-insured type stuff. Like I'm putting this as something that I want to take a look at. And you probably, I mean, on your sheet, I don't think you have anything there for that.
I,
That's
I
a
did
long
not.
run. Yeah, it's a long runway. So those are not like there's nothing about patient conversion there. I'm just trying to get contracts there. So that's probably something here you're not gonna stat maybe. Um,
Yeah.
but if you're asking me, like, are these stats that you want to look at? Yeah, it looks like there's going to be a focus on MD referrals. Like, what percentage of your initial evaluations right now are coming from MD referral?
Give me 2 seconds and I'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll show you while you're doing that. I'll pull up our buckets from last year. We compared that to 2023 as well. We saw a decrease in physician referrals. So to give you an idea, physician referrals in 2024, that was 16% of our new patients. It was actually 23% in 2023. So, but in terms of like a total, we saw 294 from physicians in 2023, and we saw 240. So that's a pretty decent drop off there. One of our main referral sources moved out of the area for a physician. Our number one referral source for physician moved out of the area. So that was representative of a decent amount of that chunk. But
So
you,
we had 56% of our new patients were MD referrals last year. Now,
yeah, so
take that
yeah, I would focus
take
on
that
that.
with a yeah, take that with a grain of salt because if the way we track it in our office, even if somebody walks in and they have a doctor's referral, if they were a past patient, they don't go in the MD referral bucket because they chose to come see us because we have so many physician on physical therapy clinics in our area. They have to physically choose to come see us because all the doctors are trying to keep that business in house. So we term that in our practice as a patient reactivation or a past patient versus
Mhm.
the MD referral. So
Yeah, for us, past patient always, no matter how they came in, or if they're a past patient, it's going to trump that. So
yep,
same thing in your practice. So you're getting a decent amount from physician referral, which is great.
we
Um,
are.
so yeah, I would probably keep that in here, just because of that stat. Um, cost per
Yeah, and the
consult.
reason it's important to us is we haven't done any physician marketing, like door to door, knocking on doors, trying to establish those relationships in almost 3 years.
How the hell are you getting all
So
those physician referrals then?
um, uh, people like me. You know,
Okay, that's great, man.
I
Good
did.
work if you
So
get it.
when I started my practice, so 14 years ago when I started the practice, I did physician marketing myself to establish those relationships for about 10 years, and then once we got to a certain point, I just kind of stopped doing that. So 3 years went by, we didn't really do it. So a lot of it's just like people already know me. But when I hired our marketer, she's now going back out and reestablishing connections because, as you know, referral referral coordinators change on a regular basis, even though the doctors stay the same. So we're just refocusing in on that.
Yeah. Okay. You want to do another division?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So you had, let's take admin. You have arrival rate as an admin stat. I would say I want admin is kind of like in that case like front desk, like ability to reschedule, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I use our schedule efficiency as that or clinic efficiency, however you want to use it. I feel like arrival rate is mostly on like what's happening on the floor, and there's a chunk of it that is okay, are we doing a good job administratively of rescheduling people? So we want the schedules to be full, and we feel like it's the admin's job to do that. Now you can reverse that and say, well, the schedules are full if if the clinicians are doing well and there's value being exchanged. So you can kind of look at it either way. But in arrival rate, typically a front desk staff will say, I don't have any control of the arrival rate. Like the PTs do a good job that people come in, but I feel like they have more control over the schedule being full. So here's another
Yeah.
example of schedule being full. If an initial evaluation cancels today, man, I want my admin staff to be calling the evaluations that are scheduled next week and saying, "Hey, can we fill this schedule?" So their goal is to have a full schedule for the week. And last year we were above 85%. So this year with our numbers, we're kind of shooting for closer to 90, which we feel like is attainable. But it's kind of like, yeah, the clinician is kind of focused on treating the patient on the floor, and they are definitely focused on making sure patients come in. But I think I stat the front desk with like, hey man, if there's holes in the schedule, you got to fix that. How can I fix that? Did you have cancels earlier in the week that you can reschedule? Do you have initial evaluations you can pull from the week upcoming and pull them into this week? That's how we use that stat.
So I just added those in super quick. I think those are great. Great. That's the whole purpose of this call, Travis. Thank you for pointing that out. Schedule efficiency is definitely one of those. The arrival rate is going to tie into clinical efficiency, which I don't know necessarily. I need to look at arrival rate, schedule efficiency, and clinic efficiency. I can
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit deeper if I need to. And number of fill-ins. That's a really good one to track on a weekly basis.
So we've
I
done that
like
as a
that.
yeah, we've done it as a mini game. So I think what you're saying here, and correct me if I'm wrong, a fill-in like for us, we call it like cancel reschedule game. So if there's 12 cancellations in the week, and we were able to reschedule four of those, like that team would get 4 points for that. And so they're kind of rescheduling. And you have to keep an eye on your admin team and make sure they're not fudging those numbers. It can't be someone called in on Tuesday and said, hey, I can't come in today. I'm going to come in on Wednesday. Do you have any openings? That's not a refill. A
No, that's a
yeah,
reschedule.
yeah, it's a reschedule. So it's like someone leaves a voicemail or someone calls and says, I can't come in today. And the person on the phone says, okay, no problem. We can reschedule you later in the week. I don't have time for that right now. I've got to go. I'm sorry. I'm going to cancel. Great. They hang up. That gets written on a piece of paper, a digital asset, whatever you want to do. Like the first time we did it was Post-it notes. There'd be a pink Post-it note on the front desk. And this is in place because of one aide that figured this out all on her own. We were trying to figure out why this office had the highest arrival rate. And we're like, are you doing anything different? And the front desk staff said, oh, I don't know. Like when someone cancels, I just write their name down and then I just try to reschedule them like tomorrow when they're not so busy or flustered or their car didn't start or whatever. And I was like, wow, that's a really good idea. So now we have a system in place for that.
Nice, nice.
Active
What?
patients. So this is, I think you're using this as it's the admin's job to make sure that people don't fall off their plans of care through some kind of follow-up system. Like if they're an active patient, they're not scheduled in the week, like admin calls them.
Yeah, yeah. But so the other thing that I was thinking about instead of active patients could have been like early discharges, number
Okay.
of early discharges. But I was curious if that was going to be an admin or a operation staff, because I feel like early discharges should be almost an operation staff because that's the therapist's job
Yeah.
to deliver enough value so that person continues to their plan of care.
For us, that's an operation stat. That's drop-offs. So anybody that comes 5 times or less that doesn't successfully graduate, those are dropouts or drop-offs, whatever you want to call them.
Stop, stop, stop. Sorry. You don't stop. I'm messing up the formatting.
So active patients for me, I mean, geez, it's kind of a combination of marketing and operations to me. To increase your number of active patients, you got to have marketing bring in leads that are converting. and you got to maintain those active patients with good care. The admin is on that team in that if they fall off a plan of care, like for us, our PTs are probably in charge of between 100 and 120 plans of care altogether. My main office, who has two PTAs, she's actually in charge of closer to like 160 or 170. I can't expect her to, in her head, keep 160 people and look at the end of the week, hey, where's Carol? I haven't seen her in a while. There has to be systems in place on the admin team for to help out with that. That system is they have active patients. The admin goes in and checks the active patient tracker. Everybody should be scheduled for the week. If there's 4 people that came this week that are not scheduled for the following week that have not been discharged, it's that admin's first responsibility to say, hey, you came in on Tuesday, you probably were busy and didn't know, but you don't have any more appointments scheduled. Let's schedule those in. So the admin can definitely help out in decreasing those dropouts and increasing your total active patients. But to me, that's most like active patients is mostly a marketing and an operations step.
So, so is it even important to track number of active patients?
I don't. I
if
just
you're
want
if
if
you're
I
tracking your arrival rate, you're tracking your discharge rate or
yep.
your graduation rate, and you're tracking your lost plan of cares, that pretty much encompasses all of that,
Yeah.
right?
And it's a hard number to set. Like it's like if you're going to set a goal for that, that's harder to do. Because if you add a clinician or a clinician leaves and moves out of the area or something like that, it's going to throw that number off a ton. So it's more those other stats that you're saying. I wouldn't expect I expect my clinical directors to know how many active patients they have. If I went to one of my clinical directors and said, how many active patients you have? If they couldn't rip it off the top of their head, they would be like, give me a second. I got to go in the active patient tracker and I can tell you because they'll use
Right,
that as a stat to try to find out, well, if my schedules aren't full, is it my visit frequency? So
right.
I need more new patients in the schedule. Like, you have 100 active patients and you have 100 visits on the schedule this week. What if that's visit frequency of 1? What if your visit frequency was 1.5? Then you'd have 150 in the schedule. What if your visit frequency was 2? You wouldn't know where to put patients. You'd have 200 patients 200 patient visits scheduled in the week if you just got your visit frequency up to 2. You don't need more new patients. You need to do a better job with the current patients you have.
So that would be my argument for actually tracking that number. So as long as your front desk or whoever's in charge of it, keeping your list clean for patients, like as people are graduated, like inactivating them in the system, it could give you a quick overview. If you say, okay, well, I have 100 active patients, and if I look up the initial plan of care or the plan of care with my operations side is 2.5, then I should have 250 visits scheduled in the week, right? If I don't have that many visits scheduled in the week, then I know I need to dive in a little bit deeper. So, um, yeah, so
So you can use that number for sure.
yep,
But it's not something that we have on a dashboard somewhere. You'd have to dig and find it in the active patient tracker.
right.
Lost plans of care. Is that a ratio you're going for? Lost plans of care compared to IEs?
Lost plans of care. No, it was like plan. It depends on what you call it. I just wrote it in there. Like we would say lost initial evaluations.
Got it. Okay.
You termed it as lost plans of care. So I just put that as a mental note in there for myself.
Yeah, we moved
Active
away from,
patients.
yeah, we still look at initial evaluation and rival rate, but that's not a number that people can wrap their head around. When you say we had 100 plans of care that we lost last year, that's $180,000 that went out the window. Then it becomes an easier number for them to act on.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely tying it to a dollar amount makes it more important. So
Yes.
I get that.
All right, you've got finance, you've got revenue per visit. I'm going to argue, I don't know how much my finance division has to do with revenue per visit.
They don't, but they can report on it.
They can, yeah.
Yeah. So not necessarily holding the finance division accountable for the revenue per visit, because if I look at operations is going to be giving me visits and units. Um, there could be an argument for revenue per visit being an operation stat, right? Because it's based on proper coding.
Mhm.
Um, so, yeah, there's an argument either way. This is the one division that I really needed to dive in and need some help. Like, what are the key stats for
Okay.
finance division? Like, what do we need to look at with them?
Yeah. So let's look at my finance OKRs, and then I'll probably give us our answers. So executive finance. So they're looking for a profit margin. Now, is my CFO in there making sure that our schedules are full and that, marketing is doing their job? Not really, but it's their job to keep an eye on it. And if it goes below that, then it's okay, guys, we're running at a 5% profit margin. It's kind of a dangerous place to be. So what's going on? Are our schedules not full? Do we need to increase patient volume? Like what's going on? So they don't necessarily control that a ton, although you could argue we don't try to decrease expenses a ton, but keeping an eye on expenses, like if we're paying for stupid stuff that we don't need, then finance will definitely say something about it. But I would argue that's one of the main stats you want to put in there. I would say your cash reserve. So that's like if you're taking, 2%, 5%, 10% of everything that comes in and using that as a reserve, you want to build that up. And then revenue. So again, how much does my CFO have to do with like this actual revenue number? That's more driven by how many new patients are we getting in? Are we doing a good job of completing plans of care? Do we have a good product? But it's kind of she reports on that. So
Exactly. So she's reporting on things that I mean, finance doesn't have really any control. They're just really looking at all the data and re-giving it back to you like a P&L, right? They interpret the data, right? Um, so that's kind of why it's hard. Like revenue per visit, yeah. So she's going to interpret all of that stuff, and if we start to see a drop in the revenue per visit, then operations has to go back and look at coding. So that's kind of why I put it in the finance division, because it's a dollar amount. It's just a hard dollar amount that's going to fluctuate. And we want it to continue to rise based on things that we do, but she's just reporting on it, or he's just reporting on it.
yep. So if I were going to pick three, I'd say profit margin because you're keeping an eye on expenses and revenue. I would say cash reserve because that's, one reflection of the healthier company. And then your gross revenue. That's kind of what I would look like. And then you can see the breakdown there. Well, how do our CFO wants to add $100,000 of cash reserve this year. Well, it breaks down to, okay, can I add $1,950 of cash every week? Like, can I put that in the bank? And then that becomes yes, no. Like we check these off. So in terms of finance, I don't know anything else finance wise that we would look at.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what Chat GPT says is revenue per visit, total revenue, profit margin, accounts receivable. I put that as a billing metric.
Yeah,
Payer mix analysis, cost per visit.
payer mix
Cost per
analysis.
visit might be something that finance might look at.
Yeah, we
Uh,
could look at that. That actually is a really good
Cash
point.
flow forecasting.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's just so dependent on revenue, but yeah, you want someone keeping an eye on it just based on your total goals for the year, like whatever your visits are, cash flow forecasting. That's kind of, well, it is a reflection of what you're spending as well. It's not just what you're bringing in. So to keep to your idea of, well, let's keep this as simple as possible, I would do a cost per visit. We use that a lot to try to explain to people, like, hey, man, you guys are making $100 every time a patient comes in the door. It's like, well, I'm not sticking that money in my boat, man. Like it costs me $86 to do that. Or
Right.
sometimes it's in the first quarter, if you're having a low first quarter, hey, it costs us $110 to treat every patient that came in. We are averaging $100 per visit. So we lost $10 every time a patient came in. And then people are like, what? That can't be right. It's like, yeah, it was. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So it gives them an idea of how money works.
Yeah, I don't really, and as far as cash flow forecasting and budgeting, you really can't visualize that. It's either done or not done. It's kind of more project work. So I don't think I would put that in a scorecard because you really can't. There's nothing to report on a weekly basis other than done or not done. So I would probably remove that.
Okay. So we're good on
Um,
finance.
yep.
All right.
Hey,
Billing.
while I'm thinking about it right now, what is the stat for how much it costs labor
Yeah.
rate? That's what. So I got to throw that in there.
So we measure that. Yeah, I guess I'll put that in operations.
Well,
Um,
that's something that my clinic directors are going to be looking at and reporting on,
yeah.
but
So
they
it'd
have to
be,
get that number from finance. So it could be a finance stat that's then reported back to operations.
yeah, for us, it's a finance stat,
Yeah,
because it's reported on in a financial dashboard.
yeah,
So
I like that
yeah.
labor. So I'll put that down in finance and take it out of operations. Okay.
So labor rate, I know we've talked about it a lot, but for people that don't know what that is, it's what percentage of every dollar that comes in goes out to your staff in the form of bonuses, salary, benefits, 401k, anything that is on the books. Like for us, like employee birthdays, we just had a staff member that was here for 10 years. So on your 5th year anniversary, you get $500. On your 10 year, you get 1,000. So that money all goes into paying your staff. So I mean, we've readjusted that number. Traditionally, like before COVID, that was like 50%. If you're doing that, you're being pretty efficient with your staff. If it goes up to 60, 65, 70, everything above 50%, consider it like if it's 55%, that's 5% of revenue that could have gone to your profit margin. That's how I like to think about it. For us, last year, I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably in the high 50s, if not the low 60s. So the cost of paying people has gone up significantly. So, and what we're getting paid per visit is going down. So that doesn't mean get out of PT, it's a disaster. It just means that you might have to adjust some of your forecasting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. Billing. This is your bread and butter. Go.
Yeah. So based on what we do in physical therapy billing, I looked over the dashboards that we create and give to our owners, and these were the top ones. So percent AR over 60 days. So we all know a lot of companies will look over 90 days, but we want to look over 60 days because we know if it gets older than 60, it's harder to collect. Um, Denial percentage. So the percent of your claims that are going out being denied, which is going to tie into like clean claims. How good are we doing at authorizations and verification of benefits? That's going to go into the denial rate. Your total charges should be reported on. Total collections, I want to know that as well, so I can see if that's actually represented in our revenue per visit. Denial resolution time. I really like this. This was a Chat GPT suggestion, but I think it's really cool. Like, so we definitely want our denial percentage to be extremely low. But of those claims that get denied, how quickly is our billing team resolving those denials? Right. First pass rate. I want that over 99%, and then units per visit actually comes out on the PTP dashboard. So that could be an operation stat, which typically that's what the clinic directors are looking at, and it's really easy to pull. But if I can get that automatically from my billing team, then I can look at it.
Where'd you put revenue per visit?
Revenue is in finance.
Finance. Okay. Um, yeah, I'll show you guys. We just did a revenue per visit report on our annual planning. So let me just pull that up really quick. And this is, I teach this stuff. I should know this stuff really well, but if you don't keep an eye on it, then sometimes it can get to a spot where you don't want it to be. So this is a big chunk of our annual planning. And we looked at units per visit, revenue per visit, and we split it up into two buckets of payers, essentially Medicare and commercial. If you're watching this and you're like, hey man, you need to break up your commercial into more buckets, I would agree with you. But for us, this was kind of an exercise that we did. So I pulled all these numbers. So you've got your revenue per visit for all the clinics up here. So I got 5 locations. Here's the revenue per visit. So when you look at it, it's pretty close. You don't want huge, if there's no large differences in payer mix, you probably want these numbers to be pretty close. Some people might look at this and say, wow, that's really close. I would argue that if you're not looking at this, the differences between these numbers are going to be a lot bigger than this. So don't be intimidated by that. But what you'll start to see is patterns. So in here, all these blue, these are my PTs, and the greens are my PTAs. So obviously you need to split up your PTs and your PTAs because they get paid differently. So that's the first thing. And then you split it up into all pairs. So this is their all units across the board, which might be one of the least valuable numbers because you need to kind of split that up. But it gives you an idea of what across the board they're doing. And then you got units per visit for Medicare initial evaluation, units per visit for commercial payer evaluation, units per visit for Medicare daily visit and commercial daily visits. Okay, so just do this. Highlight the highest and the lowest. Okay, so units per visit for Medicare initial evaluation. My lowest was 4.8 and my highest was 6.1. That's too big of a difference. That's a huge difference. So what is going on such that Dakota is at 4.8 units per visit and Todd is at 6.1? Now there's a couple people close to 6.1, 5.9, 5.8, 6.1. That's pretty close, but 4.8 out of all these is pretty low. And then we broke down. It's like, all right, each of the clinical directors wrote down when you look at these numbers, what does this make you think? So this is like, and then I break this down into revenue per visit. Now you would think that automatically the highest units per visit is going to give you the highest revenue per visit, but oftentimes that's not the case. So Jeremy, if someone had a higher units per visit as another clinician, but had the same revenue per visit, then what would you think about that person that is apparently coding more but getting paid the same thing as someone who's coding less?
Or repeat the question. I'm sorry.
So if you had two clinicians and
Uh-huh.
they had one of them had a higher units per visit than the other one, but their revenue per visit is the same, then what might you think about the person that is coding? They're doing more units, but they're coming out to the same revenue per visit. What would that indicate to you?
That tells you that they're not coding the higher paying units.
Right. They're not having a good understanding of what the insurance company wants. They're not
Yep.
coding for the higher paid 97 codes. So you just need to go into code selection. If you have someone that's just really low on units per visit, then you're looking at like, okay, like, are you spending the same amount of time with the patients that every other clinician is? Because that's really the only explanation for this. Not spending the same amount of time or not using modalities. Though those are the two major things that are going to be issues. And as it turns out, this PT, he's like, yeah, on initial evaluation, I just kind of run out of time and I don't use a ton of modalities. So that's something that we need to look at. I'm not telling him, hey, man, you got to slap modalities on everybody. I'm just saying this is what the number is, and that's why.
So looking back at the stat sheet, because you broke it down, you broke it down a couple of different ways, and that's kind of like breaking down that other thing. So I just added this. So what I actually look at and what we're going to be visualizing is total organization, and then we're going to have it broken down by location. So if you're a single location, it doesn't matter. But if you have two or three different locations, you definitely want to be tracking all of this per location, so you can see trends and stats from each individual clinic versus just as a whole. Because Travis, I know you've been in this where you have one clinic that's just kicking ass, right? And it's overshadowing some of the failures of a different clinic. But if you never look at the individual clinics, then you're not going to see that, so that you know where to put some more effort into those individual clinics.
Yeah, so that kind of shoots Jeremy's goal in the foot of like, hey, man, I just want to look at 10 metrics. Well, you can look at that, but you have to look at it as your whole company. And then you have to pull it out by each individual clinic. And then you have to
Yeah.
pull it out by each individual clinician. Not all the stats have to do that. Like we look at that for arrival rate, but usually we don't find huge differences when you break it down into the clinician level. But another stat that you like for sure want to make sure you're looking at in those three exact categories would be screen conversion. So you can
If you
have
do screens.
if you do screens, right? Or
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at it at initial valuation conversion too, if you're doing that. Like not you think every initial valuation that comes in, they come in for a full plan of care. Well, if they're not convinced on that first visit that they're going to get value out of coming in to see this PT, then they're going to have dropouts. So another way that you can, if you don't do screens, then it could be dropouts. Like pulling out dropouts as a whole company is great, but you want to pull it out by each individual location, and then you want to pull it out by each individual clinician. For us, if you do an initial valuation, the PT is on the hook for that plan of care. We'll have an initial evaluation, and because our clinics are so close, sometimes it's the PT does initial evaluation in one clinic and never sees that patient again, just for like location. We try to get them in earlier or something. It's still that PT's responsibility to make sure that they successfully graduate. That means that PT has to reach out to whatever team they went to and say, hey, here's what's going on with the patient. Here's, the goals that they have. I mean, obviously that's written down somewhere, but if that other clinic loses that patient, that goes on their scorecard. So there's a responsibility for case management that we kind of look at in our organization.
All right. Are we noodled a little bit and kind of got off topic and got really deep in the weeds right there. So are we in operations right now?
Let's see. Let me share my screen again.
We started
So
talking about revenue per visit, and
I think
so
we got a
and
couple.
y'all, if anybody's watching this and they, when Travis starts talking revenue per visit, he kind of loves that topic, so he dives in really deep. So um, I'm just going to say I've got about 4 more minutes left, so we got to go through operations real
There you
fast.
go. All right. Uh,
Now,
so
and I will say this. So, like from an owner's perspective, I want to look at a higher level. But if something's off, especially in one of those, I'm going to reach out to my clinic director or my overall regional director and I'll be like, hey, I need stats on individuals, right? And then he can give me that data. So I really just want to stay 30,000 foot view from an owner's perspective. But knowing that somebody else is going to be tracking some of that stuff at a more granular level.
Yeah. Thank you for using that expression properly, by the way. Guys, if you're out there, it's 30,000 feet because that's what a plane flies at. It's not a
Yep.
5,000 foot view. It's not a 10,000 foot view. It's 30,000 foot. Okay, moving on. Why do you have initial evaluations in operations?
That's a great question. Because that's something that the individual therapist report on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So they track their visits, they track their number of evaluations.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see that makes sense. When I look at stats, I'm like, who owns this stat? Like, if there's a problem with this stat, who am I going to? Typically, if there's a problem with initial evaluations, I'm probably not going to my staff PT. Like, they're going to tell me, dude, that's marketing. It's not my problem. Clinical director, a little bit more. Like, they're responsible for driving business. So I might go to them, but typically I'm going to go to marketing and kind of say, hey, what's going on with that? So this is an example of this stat is in here. I guess if so in marketing, you actually don't have initial evaluations in here. So
I
it's
don't.
more like leads and getting
Mhm.
the lead in front of operations, and then it's the operations job to convert them into initial evaluation. So actually,
Right.
I've turned around on this stat in like 90 seconds. Great job, Jeremy.
Yes.
Graduation rate for sure. Visits for sure. Um, the so if we're going to talk about visit frequency, I mean, that's a couple people are touching that. If you have a PT that writes once a week for 10 weeks, you're never going to get a visit frequency of 2. If you have a,
So
go ahead.
my therapist actually report on that. That's a stat that my therapists are they track themselves on a weekly basis. Is what was their average plan of care for the week? So our benchmark for them is 2.5 because we know that if, and I can like, if everybody looks at me on this video, if you watch the whole thing or if it's chopped up, if you say that you can get somebody better seeing them one time a week versus a therapist that's going to see them 3 times a week, I'm going to call BS on that because there's so much research out there that more is better. So I present that to my therapist and I'm like, dude, we need 2.5 per week because we know that they're going to arrive more, they're going to graduate more, and they're going to get better results if we see them more frequently. So that's a stat that I really hold my therapist accountable for is, and we do have the one-off vestibular patients or somebody that comes in one time. We that's an anomaly, but on average, I want my therapist writing that initial plan of care for twice a week or 2.5 times per week. We do 2 times a week, mostly 3 times a week. We're trying to get to 2.6 by the end of the year.
Okay. That's
So
higher than
there's my
most.
argument.
Yeah. Yeah, I put that research article in my PPS presentation submission, so it's in there. Initial
Yep.
plan of care, what's that?
That's that right. That's that rate. So what did you write the initial plan
Oh,
of care for
prescription.
and visit
Okay.
frequency, right? So it's frequency.
Okay. Okay. All right.
That's how yeah, that's just how I term it and track it.
Okay. All right. Well, since you have like 1 minute left, I just want to go through our metrics that we look at on a weekly basis and just see if there's anything that we missed. So I look at initial evaluation, total visits, length of stay. Is that in there? I think that's somewhere.
Length of stay should be in there.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right,
we
you look at
add
it.
that.
Yeah, we look at visit frequency. And guys, if you're looking at these numbers, our sheet is jacked up right now. It should be ready by Thursday. But this is what we look at year to date average. We look at that on a clinical level, like what they're averaging per week. Arrival rate, of course, we look at clinical efficiency. So this is how full our schedules are. We talked about that. Do you have that clinical efficiency somewhere? Like we put that
Uh,
at admin.
I don't.
Okay.
We didn't have that one.
All right. So consider that.
I
Here's our
I
initial
track
value.
it, but it's not in this. It's not going to be in this dashboard. It could be in this dashboard.
Yep. Here's our initial evaluation arrival rate. Again, don't look at these numbers. This is for this week. It's because all the initial evaluations haven't come in yet this week. It's only Wednesday. Screen arrival rate, we look at that because we're looking at the quality of our leads. If our screen arrival rate starts going down, we go back to marketing and be like, dude, you got to get us better leads. These suck. Screen conversion. So that's something we look at. If you don't do screens in your office, you can toss this out, but we do a ton of screens in our office because that is a leading stat to get us to our initial evaluations. We know that if we have tons of screens in the schedule, our initial evaluations are going to go up. Internal collections rate, successful graduation, units per visit, days to submission. We didn't talk about this. Depends on how you want to do it. But we look at this stat because we want our documentation done in session. We don't have time to talk about that right now, but it's a stat that we look at. We look at revenue, expenses, dropouts, space utilization, and revenue per visit. So those are all, and then here's our records down there. So those are the stats that we look at. We've kind of talked a ton about the stats that we're going to track for this year. I don't know, Jeremy, anything else you want to jump in on and before you have to leave?
Well, hey, while you were talking right there, I threw pull that sheet back up.
Okay. Share.
I threw a couple more in there
Couple more.
that I wanted in there. I just totally forgot about it.
All right. So
So
Jeremy came to me for a
like the
call. We tried to get this thing down to 10, and all we did was add to it.
no. I went 6 to 9 per division, right?
Okay. All right. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So this is perfect. So I added days to submission and billing because that they and then length of stay is definitely an operation stat.
Okay. And you have visit
And then
frequency.
over the counter collection rate, that is something that we track. So
Okay.
the way we track it is like how much money was supposed to be collected, how much was collected, and the percentage. So they
And
report on that.
that's exactly how you should track it. And most people are not doing it that way. You should know at the end of the week, we should have collected $8,927.27. If we did exactly that, that's 100%. If it's under that, then we got to find out where that money went. So,
Cool.
sound good?
Well, this is perfect. Yeah, actually, we'll take this back. I shared it with you. We'll take it back and we'll give it. This is what I'm going to give it to. We're getting this done by somebody. Her name is Kat. So this is the document I'm going to give to Kat and Jimmy, and then we're going to create the way for everybody to input this data so that I can visualize it every Monday.
Visualize this stuff like this. The dashboard I showed you is just a bunch of numbers. Like your staff has a hard time acting on that. Once they see it like a stock chart, then it's like it has a lot more power. So that's what we're doing with these stats. Sound good?
Absolutely.
All right,
Cool.
bud. Enjoy the
Thanks,
rest of your day
Travis.
in New York. See ya.
All right, brother.